Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice Podcast channel. Tonight we step into rural Georgia in 1840, where the pine woods breathe cold mist, and a small carpenter's cabin glows like an ember against the dark. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to sleep beside a plantation fire, while frost silvered the grass outside and every board in the wall remembered the hand that shaped it? The night is quiet, but not empty. Somewhere beyond the trees, a mule shifts, a hinge complains, and smoke folds softly beneath a low roof. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while the fire is still catching, tell us where you are listening from and what your local time is right now. Perhaps it is late where you are. Perhaps the room already feels heavy and still. Now, dim the lights. You walk through a narrow track between dark pines, feeling the earth harden beneath your shoes. The cold has a patient way of entering everything tonight. It settles in the moss, in the fence rails, and along the split logs stacked beneath a leaning shed. Above you, bare branches scratch softly against one another, making a dry sound like old paper being turned by tired hands. The air smells of pine resin, damp clay, wood smoke, and the faint sourness of animals kept somewhere out of sight. Ahead, the carpenter's cabin waits beside a small workyard. It is not large, and nobody would call it grand without smiling a little. The walls are built of hewn logs, their faces flattened by an adze and fitted with clay chinking. Some of that clay has cracked in the winter air, because of course it has. A house may try its best, but winter is a very rude guest. You see firelight moving through gaps around the shutter. It comes and goes in thin orange lines, as if the cabin is breathing. Near the door, wood shavings lie curled like pale ribbons, stiffened by the cold. A chopping block stands beside them, scarred by years of axe blows and hurried repairs. A broken wheel rim leans against the wall, waiting for attention that tomorrow will probably demand with great confidence. You lift your hand to the latch. The iron is cold enough to sting. For a moment, you simply stand there, listening. From within comes the low crackle of burning oak. From outside comes the wind moving through pine needles with a hush like distant surf. Somewhere farther off, a dog gives one short bark and thinks better of it. Even dogs respect a cold night, sometimes more wisely than people. When you enter, warmth touches your face first. It is not even warmth everywhere, because cabins are honest places. The hearth gives generously, while corners keep their chilly secrets. Still, compared with the night outside, the room feels almost tender. Smoke hangs faintly beneath the rafters, thin and blue, scented with oak, ash, and old soot. Your eyes adjust slowly, and the cabin opens itself one humble detail at a time. The floor is made of rough boards uneven beneath your feet. They flex a little as you cross them, speaking in small creaks. Against one wall stands a low bedstead, its rope support sagging slightly under a thin mattress stuffed with corn shucks. A folded blanket lies at the foot, coarse to the touch, with the scratchy patience of wool that has done too much work for too many winters. Near the hearth, a three-legged stool waits in the warmest place. Beside it rests a wooden mallet, polished dark where fingers have held it again and again. On pegs along the wall hang tools that belong to someone trusted with difficult work. You see a handsaw, a brace and bit, a draw knife, a plane, chisels, augers, and a square darkened by sweat and years. They are not decoration. They are survival made sharp. In 1840, Georgia is part of the expanding Cotton South, and plantations depend heavily on enslaved labor. That is the plain truth beneath the quiet roof. The carpenter whose cabin shelters you may be enslaved, hired out, or working under arrangements shaped by power he did not choose. His skill matters deeply, yet skill does not erase the injustice surrounding him. The cabin is warm, but the world outside it is not gentle. You stand near the hearth and let that truth remain in the room. Bedtime history can be soft without being blind. The fire may soothe your breathing, but it also lights the edges of a society built on forced labour, ownership, and control. A carpenter might repair barns, mend cotton gins, build doors, shape coffins, make wheels, and patch roofs before rain finds every weakness. His hands hold knowledge that others rely upon daily. The hearth is built from local stone and clay, with a simple wooden mantle above it. A pot hangs from an iron hook. Blackened by many meals and many small economies, the fire itself burns low and steady. Red coals pulse beneath half-charred logs, sending out a heat that warms your knees through your clothing. When you lean closer, your skin tightens slightly from the dry air. When you lean back, winter returns immediately. A small shelf holds a tin cup, a wooden bowl, a twist of cloth, and perhaps a little salt wrapped carefully against dampness. Nothing here is careless, because waste has no place in a working cabin. Even the light is managed. A stub of tallow candle waits unlit, saved for when flame must be carried beyond the hearth. The room depends on firelight, and firelight has moods. It flatters some things and hides others. You notice the smell of fresh wood beneath the smoke. It comes from boards stacked along the wall, pale where they have been newly planed. The shavings on the floor give off a faint sweetness, especially near the hearth where warmth wakes the sap. There is oak here, and pine, and maybe cypress brought from wetter ground. Each wood behaves differently under a tool. Each has its own stubborn little personality. A carpenter in this place must know those personalities well. Pine cuts quickly but dents easily. Oak is strong and heavy, with a grain that can punish impatience. Cypress resists rot, which makes it useful where dampness lingers. You run your fingertips over a plank, feeling ridges left by the plane. The surface is mostly smooth, yet not perfectly so. Perfection is expensive. Usefulness is the nightly prayer of a working board. The cabin's roof rises low above you, held by rafters darkened with smoke. Small bundles hang there, kept away from mice if mice are in a respectful mood. They rarely are. You might see dried herbs, a strip of leather, cord, or a bit of iron hardware saved from something broken. In such a cabin, broken things do not always become useless. They become future solutions, waiting quietly in corners. Outside, the cold presses against the shutters. Inside, the fire answers with soft pops and sighs. You hear water shift in the pot as it warms, not yet boiling. The sound is small, but in a silent room it becomes important. You can almost feel the cabin arranging itself around the hearth. Tools, bed, stool, boards, cup, blanket, boots, and shadows all lean toward that one living centre. A quirky little detail rests near the door. It is a chalk line, wound around a scrap of wood, stained with dark powder. Some carpenters used soot, charcoal dust, or coloured earth to snap straight marks across boards. Imagine that. A bit of dirt, a tight string, and a clever hand could create order from rough timber. History often hides in grand laws and battles, but it also lives in string. On a peg near the workbench, an old coat hangs heavy with sawdust. You touch the sleeve gently, feeling stiff cloth, and the powdery grit worked deep into the weave. The coat smells of sweat, smoke, rain, and pine. It is the smell of labour carried indoors. The workbench beneath it is plain, just boards fixed on trestles, but the top is alive with marks, cuts, stains, dents, and burns make a quiet map. Historians still argue whether skilled plantation artisans gained meaningful leverage through their trades, or whether such skills mainly tightened the system around them. The answer changes by place, owner, task, season, and person. Some skilled workers negotiated small privileges, earned limited money, or moved more widely than field hands. Yet every such possibility lived under laws and customs designed to deny freedom. The contradiction is not tidy. History seldom folds neatly. You sit on the stool, and it rocks slightly before finding balance. The wood is warm on one side and cool on the other. Your hands rest on your knees as the cabin breathes around you. The wall nearest the fire glows amber. The opposite wall fades into brown shadow, where tools seem to hover like quiet witnesses. You hear the faint ticking of cooling iron near the hearth. It is almost a clock. The night outside deepens. The plantation yard beyond the door becomes less a place than a set of sounds. A chain shifts somewhere, perhaps on a gate. Hooves stamp in packed earth. A loose shutter knocks twice, waits, then knocks again, as if politely asking to be repaired. That, too, is the carpenter's life. Wood complains, iron loosens, weather intrudes, and tomorrow arrives with a list. For now, though, tomorrow stays outside. The cabin has enough work simply holding its warmth. You notice how the chinking between logs bulges in pale seams, patched by hand. Some seams have straw mixed into the clay. Others show the scrape of fingers, pressed flat before drying. These walls are not silent. They record repairs in layers, each one a small argument against wind. You imagine the carpenter returning at dusk, shoulders tired, hands nicked, eyes narrowed from sawdust. He would have ducked through this doorway carrying the smell of the yard with him. Perhaps he set a tool down first, always the tool before the body. Perhaps he checked the fire, because warmth is not a luxury on a night like this. Then he might have stood very still, letting the room receive him. The bedstead looks narrow, and the mattress would rustle under every movement. Corn shucks make a dry whispering sound. Not unpleasant, though not exactly royal either. There is humour in such honesty. Nobody in this cabin is floating on clouds, unless the clouds have been stuffed into ticking with agricultural leftovers. Still, when exhaustion comes, even a modest bed can feel like mercy. A small gap near the floor sends a thread of cold air across your ankle. You shift your foot away from it. The draught moves invisibly, yet you know exactly where it is. Cabins teach the body to read air. Your skin becomes a map of leaks, warmth, smoke, and dampness. In the firelight, even discomfort becomes specific and almost intimate. Cold is no longer an idea. It has direction. You hear the wind again, more strongly now. It pushes against the door, then slides around the cabin in search of weakness. The flames bend slightly, as if listening. Smoke twists upward into the dark throat of the chimney. A coal breaks apart with a soft collapse, sending sparks upward for a breath. They rise, shine, and vanish. A brief little sky. The cabin holds. Not perfectly, not elegantly, but enough. That word matters here. Enough warmth to sit, enough light to see your hands, enough shelter to keep frost from the blanket, enough quiet to hear your own breathing settle. In the world beyond these walls, enough is not always granted. Inside, for this moment, enough feels almost generous. You draw the blanket around your shoulders. It scratches at your neck, but its weight is comforting. The smell of wool joins the smoke, the clay, the pine shavings, and the iron tang of tools. Your thoughts slow as your senses grow clearer. You do not need to hurry through this room. Nothing here hurries for your comfort. The cabin invites patience, because patience is built into every joint. The fire lowers itself into a deeper red. Shadows stretch along the boards, long and soft. The tools on the wall no longer look sharp. They look tired. Even the saw seems ready for sleep, its teeth dulled by orange light. Outside, the cold continues its old work, silvering grass, tightening mud, stiffening rope, and making every living creature consider the value of shelter. You remain beside the hearth, listening to Georgia winter settle around the cabin. The plantation lies beyond the door, with its fields, fences, hierarchies, and unanswered human sorrows. Yet within these few walls, you feel the human scale of history, a stool, a cup, a board, a hand-smoothed handle. The pass becomes quieter when it is close enough to touch. Your breathing follows the fire. In, the scent of oak smoke. Out, the day's imaginary dust. In, the hush of pine woods. Out, the sharpness of cold. The room grows dimmer, but not darker exactly. It becomes softer. Every object loses its edge and joins the warm blur of evening. You have arrived at the carpenter's cabin, and the night has closed around it like a dark, cold hand. For now, you're inside the glow. The fire has steadied into a quiet red heart, and your eyes wander toward the tools. They hang along the cabin wall in a careful order that is not accidental. A tired person may live among clutter, but a working carpenter cannot afford mystery. The saw must be where the hand expects it. The chisel must not hide under cloth. The auger must wait within reach. Because wood does not become kinder when someone wastes time searching. You stand slowly, letting the blanket fall from your shoulders. The floor gives a soft groan beneath your weight. Near the workbench, the air smells different from the hearth. Here, smoke is joined by oil, damp iron, old leather, and the clean sweetness of shaved pine. Fine dust clings to the bench top, pale and powdery, gathering in the knife marks like frost in tiny valleys. You touch the nearest plane with 2 fingers. Its wooden body is smooth where palms have pressed it through years of work. The blade, set at an angle, catches a small line of firelight. This tool turns rough boards into useful surfaces, and useful surfaces into doors, shutters, shelves, benches, and coffins. A plane is simple to look at. It is much less simple to use well. You lift it carefully, feeling the dense weight of seasoned wood and iron. It is warm on the side facing the hearth, cool on the far side. That uneven temperature tells you exactly how still the room has become. The handle fits the hand like an old agreement. You imagine pushing it forward across oak, hearing the thin shaving rise and curl away. That sound is nearly music, if your taste is practical. On the bench lies a board half-worked. One face is still rough, ridged from the saw. The other has been smoothed by long strokes. You run your palm across both sides, and the difference feels like a lesson. One side catches your skin, the other receives it. The carpenter's skill lives in that difference, in knowing when wood is ready to serve and when it will still fight back. In 1840, most plantation buildings in Georgia were made by hand from local materials. Timber came from nearby woods, cut and shaped with axes, saws, wedges, and patient muscle. Nails were available, but they were not treated as invisible little conveniences. They cost money. Wooden pegs, careful joints, reused hardware, and clever repairs all helped stretch resources across a demanding plantation economy. You notice a box beneath the bench, half pushed into shadow. Inside are odd lengths of iron, bent nails, broken hinges, and little scraps of metal saved from earlier failures. Nothing glamorous waits there. Still, the box feels important. A bent nail can be straightened. A hinge leaf can be reused. A screw, even a poor one, may become precious when a gate is leaning and rain is coming. That is one of the quiet truths of this cabin. Work does not begin with abundance. It begins with what is at hand. A carpenter here must measure not only wood, but weather, time, orders, tools, and risk. The plantation house may demand a new sash. The smokehouse may need a door. The quarters may need repairs that are delayed too long. Every board has a place in a larger system. You pick up a wooden rule, worn at the edges. Its marks are darkened by dirt from fingers. Measuring seems so ordinary that it nearly disappears from thought. Yet every cartwheel, shelf, frame, and stair depends upon it. A wrong measure becomes a crooked door. A crooked door becomes a draft. A draft becomes a cold sleeper grumbling in the dark, which is history at its most relatable. Beside the rule lies a square, plain and severe. It makes right angles, or at least argues for them. In a world of warped wood and shifting soil, the square offers a stern little fantasy of order. You press it against the board, feeling where the edge meets and where it fails. The gap is small. Still, a carpenter sees such gaps the way a cook smells smoke before supper burns. The brace and bit hangs from a peg nearby. Its curved handle looks almost elegant. You set the bit point lightly against the bench and imagine turning it by hand. Slowly boring a hole through timber. No engine hums, no electric drill shrieks, only wrist, pressure, iron, and the slight crunch of fibres giving way. The pace is slower, but the attention is deeper. Every motion asks something of the body. The saw is longer than you expected. Its blade is dark, with polished brightness along the teeth. When you touch the handle, it feels shaped by use rather than design. A good handle remembers hands. The teeth would need filing, setting, and protecting from damp. A dull saw punishes everyone. It turns a task into a sermon about neglect, and nobody needs extra sermons at bedtime. A small triangular file sits wrapped in cloth. It is not much to look at, but it keeps the saw useful. This is the unromantic side of craftsmanship. Tools require care, and care takes time that nobody applauds. Sharpening, wiping, oiling, hanging, checking for rust, and making sure the edge survives the night. It is humble work. It is also the reason anything gets built. You see a draw knife resting across two pegs, its handles pointing outward like quiet horns. This tool would peel bark, shape spokes, trim rails, and coax curves from stubborn wood. Pulled toward the body with care, it could make a rough piece suddenly graceful. Pulled carelessly, it could punish fingers very quickly. The tool has no opinions. It simply respects attention and embarrasses haste. The bench has a vise made of wood, tightened with a wooden screw. Its threads are broad and hand-cut. You lean closer, admiring the spiral. Even the device used to hold work had to be made by someone who understood work. That circular thought feels pleasing in the quiet room. A tool makes a thing. A thing helps make another tool. The cabin is full of such little loops. A quirky tidbit waits in the shavings near the bench. Some carpenters saved long, clean plain curls for kindling, mattress stuffing, or packing fragile goods. One perfect shaving might light a morning fire faster than a whole heroic log, which is a little unfair to the log. The smallest scrap could be useful. Even wood's leftovers were invited to contribute, because waste was treated with suspicion. You kneel and lift one pale curl. It is thin enough to glow when held near the flame. It smells of fresh pine, sweet and resinous. Its edge tickles your thumb, and its shape remembers the motion that made it. A whole afternoon of labour can be read in such fragments. Long curls tell of steady pressure. Broken chips tell of knots, changes in grain, and possibly a mood that needed improving. The carpenter's cabin is also a workshop, but not entirely. It must be lived in, warmed, swept, slept in, and protected from weather. Tools share the same space as blankets and bowls. The wall that holds a chisel also holds a coat. The bench may support both a door frame and a supper plate, although probably not at the same time unless someone has surrendered to chaos. You hear the roof creak above you, settling under cold. The sound travels through the rafters and into the walls. Wood speaks constantly in small ways. It swells with damp, shrinks with dryness, twists in heat, and complains when forced into duty. A carpenter learns those complaints. He hears warnings in creaks that others ignore. He sees a sagging lintel and already knows tomorrow will not be peaceful. Plantation carpentry could include skilled work far beyond simple repairs. A carpenter might build storage sheds, frame barns, maintain wagons, repair looms, make furniture, and alter machinery linked to cotton production. Cotton gins, introduced in the 1790s, made short staple cotton more profitable in much of the South. By 1840, that profitability had helped expand plantation agriculture and intensify the demand for enslaved labour. That fact sits heavily among the tools. These objects are clever, useful, and beautiful in their plain way. Yet they served a world where beauty and coercion could stand beside one another, shamefully close. A well-made gate might guard property. A repaired wagon might carry cotton. A sturdy cabin might shelter someone whose life was controlled by another person's claim. Wood does not absolve the hand that orders it. You breathe slowly, letting the room remain honest. The fire cracks once, bright and sudden. Sparks drift upward and vanish into soot. On the bench, a chisel blade gleams for a moment, then dulls again. It has a narrow edge and a mushroomed handle, struck many times by a mallet. The handle bears dents like old knuckles. It has been asked to endure, and it has. You lift the mallet next. Its head is heavier than it looks. One side is flattened from use, darker than the rest. The grip is slightly sticky with old oil and handwear. There is something intimate about handled wood. It carries the shape of repeated pressure. Your own hand finds the same hollow made by another hand, and the distance of time feels thin. Scholars continue to debate how often enslaved artisans on plantations trained through formal instruction, family teaching, observation, or forced necessity. Some records mention skilled workers by trade, while many lives remain only partly visible. Account books may list a carpenter, a blacksmith, or a cooper, but they rarely preserve the private story of learning. A name may survive. A method may not. You look again at the tools, and the silence around them seems fuller. Each one suggests a body in motion. The saw needs shoulders. The plane needs rhythm. The auger needs steady wrists. The chisel needs judgment at the exact instant before too much wood is removed. Skill is not only knowledge in the head, it is knowledge stored in joints, palms, breath, and scars. On a shelf above the bench sits a lump of beeswax or tallow wrapped in cloth. It may be used to ease a saw blade, protect thread, or help a wooden screw turn more kindly. Such small aids rarely make dramatic history. Nobody paints a grand scene called Person Greasing a Stubborn Screw, and yet, without small helps, work becomes longer, rougher, and more likely to provoke muttering. The candlelight remains unspent, but the fire gives enough to see. Shadows of tools stretch across the wall like a second set of tools, larger and stranger. The saw shadow bends over the bed. The square becomes a dark angle near the rafters. The hanging auger looks almost like a question mark. Perhaps every tool is a question. What must be fixed? What must be shaped? What must be endured? You listen to the small sounds within the cabin, a coal settling, a board ticking, the faint rub of your sleeve against the bench. Outside. The wind moves along the wall, searching again for cracks. The workshop smell grows stronger as the warmth stirs it upward. Pine, oil, iron, old sweat, and smoke mingle into one deep working scent. It is not delicate. It is comforting anyway. A narrow shelf holds wooden pegs, each one shaved by hand. They look like simple sticks until you imagine their purpose. Pegs hold joints, fasten frames, close gaps, and keep structures from loosening. They are modest, but they matter. Many solid things depend on pieces nobody notices. That may be one of history's favourite tricks. Honestly, the overlooked part keeps the proud part standing. You take one peg and turn it between your fingers. Its sides are facetted by knife cuts. It is not round, not perfectly smooth, not ornamental. It is meant to be driven into a hole and hold. The end is slightly tapered. Someone made it quickly, but not carelessly. In a cabin where time is short, such a distinction matters. Quick is not the same as poor. The carpenter's work ties him to many parts of plantation life, even when he remains socially constrained. He may be called before sunrise to mend a broken harness board. He may be sent to repair a tenant structure, patch a corn crib, or shape a replacement part that no store can provide. Wood is everywhere because wood is affordable, available, and endlessly needy. It rots, splits, warps, loosens, and waits for attention. You feel the night leaning against the cabin as you stand among these tools. The warmth is strongest near your knees, but your shoulders feel cooler now. You move closer to the hearth with the plane still in your hands. The blade sends a narrow flash into the room. Then you set it back where it belongs. A borrowed tool should return home. Even imagination owes respect. The arrangement on the wall now seems less like storage and more like a sleeping orchestra. Each instrument waits for its morning note: saw, plane, square, auger, chisel, mallet, rule, draw knife, file. In daylight, they will scrape, bite, turn, strike, and sing through timber. Tonight, they rest in orange silence. The carpenter's cabin is not merely shelter. It is a place where skill sleeps beside necessity. You return to the stool near the fire, carrying the scent of the bench with you. Your fingers still feel the smooth handle of the plane and the rough edge of the peg. The room seems warmer now, not because the fire has grown, but because you understand it better. Every object has a task. Every task has a history. Every history has someone breathing quietly inside it. The flames lean around a dark knot in the log. They cannot consume it quickly, so they work slowly, brightening its edges. That feels right for this place. Some truths must be approached gradually. The tools on the wall do not explain everything, but they invite attention. They show labour, skill, control, patience, and survival gathered within arm's reach. You let your hands rest open in your lap. The cabin settles again. The wind continues outside, but the tools remain still, hanging in their careful order. For a few quiet moments, you simply listen to the shaped wood around you, and to the unshaped night pressing beyond the door. The pot over the hearth begins to murmur, and supper slowly announces itself. It is not a grand meal, and that may be the kindest thing about it. Grand meals require polishing, serving, explaining, and pretending nobody is tired. This supper asks less. It asks for a bowl, a spoon, a little patience, and a place close enough to the fire that your fingers remember they belong to you. You sit near the hearth while the steam rises in pale threads. The smell is plain but welcome. Cornmeal thickens in water, perhaps with a little salt, perhaps with a scrap of fat saved from another meal. There may be greens in the pot, limp and dark from long cooking. There may be beans if stores allow. The fragrance is earthy, smoky, and soft, with the faint bitterness of winter greens underneath. The cabin feels different when food is warming. Tools still hang on the wall, but hunger changes the room's attention. The bench becomes less important than the pot. The bed waits quietly, but the bowl has become the evening's small throne. Even the fire seems to understand its duty, licking the pot's blackened belly with careful orange tongues. Fire can be dramatic, yes, but tonight it is domestic. You hear the thick food shift as it bubbles. A wooden spoon rests across a bowl, its handle worn thin in the middle. You pick it up and feel the grain beneath your thumb. It has been washed, dried, darkened, and used again. The rim of the bowl is slightly uneven, and that seems honest. A perfect bowl would look almost suspicious in a place like this. The main fact of the meal is corn in the Georgia countryside of 1840. Corn is everywhere in ordinary diets. It fills fields, feeds livestock, and becomes meal, mush, bread, hominy, and grits. For enslaved people, rations often centered on cornmeal and pork, though the amount and quality varied widely. Gardens, hunting, fishing, trading, and careful saving could add variety where possible. That basic truth gives the room a heavier flavour. Supper is comfort, but it is also evidence. Food reveals power. Whoever controls rations controls time, strength, and tomorrow's labour. Yet within those limits, people still cook, season, share, improvise, and remember tastes from home. A simple bowl may hold both constraint and creativity. History has an inconvenient habit of being complicated at dinner. You lean closer as the steam reaches your face. It dampens your skin and smells faintly of ash from the hearth. The pot lid rattles once, then settles. Outside, the wind scours the yard, but inside the sound of simmering makes a softer weather. It fills the pauses between the fire's crackle and the slow settling of wood. The cabin becomes a bowl of warmth around the bowl of food. A bit of corn cake warms on a flat stone near the coals. Its edges are browned, with tiny cracks across the surface. You can smell the toasted meal as it dries and crisps. When you touch it, the underside is hot enough to make you pull back quickly. Very dignified. Nothing says historical immersion like nearly losing a fingertip to humble bread. You wait, because waiting is part of the meal. Food cooked by fire does not obey a neat clock. Heat gathers unevenly, bright in one place and lazy in another. The cook must turn the cake, stir the pot, shift the embers, and judge by smell, sound, and thickness. A modern kitchen hides many decisions. This hearth displays all of them. Glowing and smoky, the spoon moves through the pot with slow resistance. The food is thickened into something that will hold warmth well, that matters on a freezing night. Thin broth disappears quickly into the body, but thick cornmeal stays, heavy and reassuring. It coats the bowl and sends up steam that smells of grain and wood smoke. You feel hunger settle into expectation, which is much more civilized. A small gourd dipper hangs from a peg. It is light, dry, and polished by handling. Gourds were widely used for dippers, containers, and scoops in rural households. Because a useful plant has excellent manners, it grows, dries, hollows, and becomes a tool without demanding a store receipt. The dipper's rim is uneven, but it holds water well enough. That is its entire argument, and it wins. Near the hearth sits a covered crock. Inside might be lard, pickled vegetables, molasses, or something kept carefully away from mice. You do not open it. Some mysteries deserve manners. Still, its presence suggests the quiet architecture of food storage. Winter eating depends on what was dried, salted, smoked, pickled, ground, cured, hidden, guarded, stretched, and remembered. Hunger teaches planning better than any tidy lecture. The first mouthful would be hot, grainy, and plain. It would warm the tongue, then the throat, then the chest. If there is salt, the flavour sharpens. If there is pork fat, it deepens. If greens are mixed in, they bring a dark, earthy taste that lingers. The texture is soft, with small roughness from the meal. It is not elegant, but elegance has gone to bed somewhere else. You hold the bowl in both hands. Its heat presses into your palms through the wood. The sensation is immediate and human before tables, manners, recipes, and arguments about authenticity. There is the simple fact. Warm food in cold hands feels like rescue. The room grows quieter around that feeling. Even the wind seems farther away for a few breaths. A quirky little supper detail comes from ash cakes, sometimes made by placing corn dough near hot ashes or coals. The name sounds rather dramatic, as if the bread has survived a small disaster. In truth, careful cooks kept the dough protected, brushed it clean, and relied on heat held in the hearth. A little ash might cling anyway. People survived. Bread has always been more forgiving than pride. Food in this cabin carries traces of many traditions. Native American corn knowledge shaped the region long before plantation spread across Georgia. West African foodways influenced cooking through techniques, crops, tastes, and memory carried by enslaved people. European settlers added their own habits and demands. The result was not a simple blending. It was a pressured, unequal, inventive world where meals could carry long histories in ordinary bowls. You hear a spoon scrape the side of the pot. The sound is slow, circular and sleepy. The fire pops softly, and the smell of scorched corn rises for a moment. It is not burned badly, just touched by the pot's hot bottom. That flavour might be liked by someone or blamed on someone else. Kitchens, even tiny hearth corners, have always been excellent places for quiet opinions. The cabin's single room makes eating intimate. There is no formal distance between food, work, and rest. A shaving on the floor may lie not far from a crumb. A boot dries beside the hearth while supper steams nearby. The bed is only a few steps away. Everything shares air. Smoke coats the rafters, food scents the blankets, and the blankets carry the day's dust back towards sleep. Historians still dispute how much variety enslaved workers could add to standard rations in different places. Some accounts describe garden patches, poultry, fishing, hunting, or market activity. Other records show severe restriction, poor quality provisions, and constant shortage. The evidence does not form one neat picture. It changes with region, season, owner, skill, local custom, and the stubborn resourcefulness of people living under constraint. You take another slow bite in imagination, and the food seems to thicken the silence. The cornmeal's warmth spreads through the body, not suddenly, but like a blanket being pulled up inch by inch. Your shoulders loosen. Your jaw unclenches. A meal this plain does not entertain the mind, which is part of its gift. It asks you to be present, chew slowly, and stop pretending the day was light. A small piece of smoked meat might hang from a rafter, wrapped or tucked away. If so, its smell would mix with soot and timber, salty and rich. Meat was valuable, and portions could be small. A scrap could season a whole pot, lending its flavour without becoming a feast. That is both clever and slightly unfair. The beans do the heavy lifting, and the pork gets all the applause. The spoon rests against the bowl between mouthfuls. The bowl cools around the edges first. You notice how warmth moves through things, how it arrives, fades, and must be renewed. Food, fire, clothing, shelter, all follow that same rule. Nothing stays warm simply because you wish it. Someone must gather wood, grind meal, carry water, tend coals, patch cracks, and keep watch over the ordinary needs of living. Water sits in a small bucket near the door, cold enough to ache against the teeth. It may have come from a well, spring, or nearby source, carried by hand through the evening chill. You can smell damp wood from the bucket staves. The dipper knocks lightly against the side when the floor shifts. That little hollow sound reminds you that even water has weight, distance, and labour inside it. There is perhaps a little sweetness, though not much. Sorghum syrup became more common later in many southern places, while molasses from sugar production could appear in trade or rations. Honey might exist if bees were kept or found. Sweetness, when present, would be treasured. A small touch on cornbread could brighten the whole meal. The tongue remembers kindness very quickly. You imagine eating with another person in the room, though the cabin remains quiet around you. Conversation at supper would be low, practical, and shaped by exhaustion. A question about tomorrow's repair, a remark about the cold, a small complaint about damp wood refusing to burn properly, perhaps a joke, dry as kindling, aimed at a mule, a manager, or a plank that warped like it had personal ambitions. The firelight moves across the bowl, turning the food golden, then brown, then gold again. Shadows from the pothooks sway across the hearth. The smell of supper clings to your sleeves. Outside, the night is sharpened further. You can sense it under the door, a thin silver blade of cold air. Inside, the meal answers with steam, fat, grain, and patience. You set the empty bowl near the hearth. A film of cornmeal dries along the inside, pale and stubborn. It will need rinsing or scraping. Even comfort leaves work behind. The spoon is wiped carefully, because there may not be endless clean water waiting for convenience. The pot is shifted away from the fiercest heat. Leftovers, if any, are saved. Waste would be almost indecent. Your hands smell faintly of wood smoke and corn. You rub your fingers together, feeling the fine grit of meal. The warmth in your stomach makes the room feel more forgiving. The tools on the wall seem less severe now. The bed looks less narrow. The blanket looks less scratchy. Supper has performed its quiet magic, not by changing the cabin, but by changing what your body can bear. A coal drops inward, and the fire flares along a split log. Light fills the hearthstones and travels over the packed clay at their base. You watch the glow deepen, slow, and deepen again. The room settles into the after-supper hush, that old human pause when the body is fed and the mind has not yet returned to worry. The pot gives one last soft tick as it cools. The wind keeps moving outside, but it sounds less important now. You sit with warm palms, a full stomach, and the smoky sweetness of corn still lingering in the air. In this small carpenter's cabin, supper has not erased hardship. It has simply made a little circle of endurance around the fire and invited you to rest within it. The firelight spreads across the timber, and the cabin begins to reveal its making. Not its furnishings, not its tools, not its supper, but the bones of the place. The walls stand around you in long horizontal courses, each log chosen, cut, dragged, shaped, lifted, fitted, and persuaded into position. A cabin can look simple from a distance. Up close, it becomes a patient argument with trees, weather, gravity, and time. You sit close enough to feel heat on your shins, while the wall behind you remains cool. The difference makes the room seem alive. Warmth gathers where flame can reach. Cold lingers where corners keep their secrets. The fire brightens one log, then another, showing axe marks in shallow flashes. Each mark is a small fossil of motion. A blade struck there, a wrist turned there, a shoulder tired there. The logs are not perfectly even. That gives them character, which is a polite way of saying they do what they can. One bows slightly inward, another has a knot like a dark eye. The clay between them has dried in ridges, pressed in with fingers and perhaps patched many times. You can see straw and sand caught in the pale seams. The cabin is not one event. It is maintenance made visible. In rural Georgia during the 1840s, log construction remained common for many modest buildings. Timber was plentiful in many areas, and skilled labour could turn local trees into houses, barns, smokehouses, corn cribs, and worksheds. Plantation landscapes included a wide range of structures, from the main house to outbuildings and cabins, all needing steady repair. Wood was abundant, but it was never effortless. You imagine the first choice of trees. Not every trunk is equal. Some are too twisted, some rot at the heart, some split badly. Pine might be easy to cut and lift, while oak gives strength but demands more labour. The carpenter must see the standing tree and picture the wall inside it. That is a strange gift, really. To look at a forest and see shelter sleeping upright. A log cabin begins long before a roof appears. Trees must be felled, trimmed, and moved. Bark may be peeled away. Faces may be hewn flat with a broad axe or adze. Notches must be cut at corners, so the logs meet and hold. Then gaps must be sealed with chinking and daubing. It sounds straightforward when listed calmly. In practice, it is heavy, sweaty, splinter-filled work with weather watching judgmentally. The corner notches catch your attention. Firelight slips into their shadows, showing how one log locks with another. The cuts are rough but purposeful. A good notch keeps the wall from drifting apart. A poor notch invites wind, sagging, insects, and language best not spoken near bedtime. The joinery is practical, not fancy. Yet there is quiet intelligence in it, the kind learned through repetition and consequence. You lean closer to the wall and smell it. That may seem odd, but history is full of useful oddness. The logs smell faintly of old resin, smoke, damp earth, and dust warmed by the hearth. Under that is another scent, dry and woody, almost sweet. Houses carry smells the way cloth carries memory. This cabin has absorbed winters, summers, work clothes, meals, rain, and countless smoky evenings. A quirky bit of building lore appears in the clay seams. Some rural builders mix clay with straw, grass, moss, animal hair, or whatever fibrous material helped the daubing hold. A wall could contain bits of a whole yard, pressed into service. That is charming, in a mildly untidy way. Imagine asking a cabin what it is made of, and it answers trees, mud, grass, patience, and a little mystery. The hearth is the cabin's brightest craft. Its stones are uneven, gathered rather than quarried in perfect blocks. Mortar fills the spaces between them, smoked black near the firebox. The chimney may be made of sticks and clay, or stone if resources allowed. In many modest southern cabins, chimneys could be clay-lined, wood-frame structures that required careful upkeep. Fire, very famously, does not respect optimism. You watch smoke climb and vanish. The draught is imperfect, letting a faint haze remain under the rafters. Your eyes sting slightly, not enough to suffer, just enough to remind you that warmth has a price. The chimney draws better when the fire is strong. It sulks when the flame sinks low. A badly made chimney could smoke a room miserably. A well-tended one made winter bearable. The cabin's door is thick but plain. It is built from vertical boards, held together by horizontal battens. The latch is simple, probably wood with iron where necessary. Firelight slides over the grain, catching the raised ridges. You notice where hands have touched the latch so often that the wood has darkened. Doors are among the most intimate parts of any dwelling. They feel every departure and every return. The shutters are simpler still. Glass windows would be costly in many humble cabins, so openings might be covered with boards, shutters, cloth, or oiled paper, depending on place and means. Tonight, the shutter holds back the cold with stubborn dignity. It rattles softly when the wind presses it. No glass sparkles. No curtains drift elegantly. The cabin chooses survival over prettiness, which is a respectable decision. The floorboards beneath you are laid with slight gaps between them. In firelight, those gaps become dark lines running across the room. Cold air rises through one or two, searching for ankles. The boards were likely pit-sawn, whip-sawn, or split and dressed, depending on available labour and equipment. Every plank represents effort. Floors do not arrive politely from nowhere. They are wrestled from trees and argued flat. You rest your palm on one board. It feels dry near the hearth, but rougher and cooler toward the wall. A splinter catches the edge of your finger, tiny and sharp. That sudden sting brings the cabin out of dream and into body. Wood is not a soft historical idea. It has edges. It has grain. It remembers being a tree and occasionally takes revenge. The rafters overhead form dark triangles beneath the roof. They are not decorative, but their shadows are lovely. They hold up shakes or rough boards, perhaps weighted and patched against leaks. Rain would find every weakness eventually. It always does. A carpenter living here would know the roof not as an abstract structure, but as a map of trouble spots. That corner drips, that seam lifts, that peg needs watching. Historians still debate how much of a typical plantation cabin's construction reflected African building traditions, European frontier methods, native influence, or forced adaptation to available materials. The evidence shifts by region and surviving example. Many cabins were altered, moved, rebuilt, or lost entirely. Written records often describe ownership and costs more than technique. The buildings themselves speak, but many have disappeared before anyone listened closely. You look at the cabin as a scholar might, then as a sleeper might. The scholar sees materials, labour systems, architectural forms, and social meaning. The sleeper asks whether the roof leaks and the fire holds. Both views matter. A building is never only a symbol, and never only a shelter. It is where the large forces of history become low rafters, cold draughts, sore backs, and a place to lay the head. The workbench in the corner seems connected now to every surface around you. It is not separate from the cabin. It is the cabin's continuing conversation with itself. A plane smooths a board for the door, a chisel adjusts a peg for the bed, a saw trims a patch for the shutter. The tools do not merely make new things, they keep old things from surrendering. Light moves across the ceiling in slow waves. Flames shrink and flare, making the rafters appear to breathe. You hear a faint creak above, caused by cold tightening the wood. Temperature changes make buildings speak at night. They pop, settle, groan, and whisper. A person unfamiliar with such sounds might imagine footsteps. A person who lives here knows the difference, unless the imagination is being dramatic for free. Near the hearth, the mantelboard is soot-stained and slightly warped. It holds a few necessary objects, but its presence also matters as a line between flame and wall. The underside is darkened by heat. Along one edge, knife cuts show where someone shaved tinder or trimmed a small piece in a hurry. Furniture, architecture, and tool use blur together here. Everything performs more than one duty. The cabin's warmth depends on the fire, but also on the building's rough skill. Logs slow the wind. Chinking fills gaps. The roof sheds frost and rain. The door gives the night one less opening. The floor lifts the body above cold ground. None of these things is perfect. Together, they make a fragile pocket of livability. That is not romance. That is engineering with cold fingers. You think of the carpenter shaping these elements with limited light, limited time, and perhaps limited permission. If he was enslaved, his expertise could be demanded without freedom over its use. If hired, he still worked inside a plantation world governed by wealth and racial power. Craftsmanship here is admirable, but it cannot be separated from the conditions around it. A straight board may stand in a crooked society. The fire gives a low sigh as bark collapses inward. A brighter flame uncurls along the log and reveals more axe marks near the doorway. They run in diagonal strokes, shallow and rhythmic. You can almost hear the chopping that made them. Strike, lift, breathe, strike, lift, breathe. A wall that seems still is full of past movement. Firelight is simply kind enough to show it slowly. On the table, a small wooden wedge sits alone. It may have been used to tighten a joint, prop a chair, split kindling, or silence an annoying wobble. Wedges are humble geniuses. They turn pressure into movement. They hold doors open, split logs apart, and make crooked things behave for a while. Nobody praises the wedge at parties. This is probably why parties are historically incomplete. The cabin's construction also shapes sound. The log walls absorb some noise and return some as dull echoes. The floor carries footsteps in low wooden notes. The roof answers wind with a soft shiver. When you shift on the stool, the room responds quietly. You're not sitting inside emptiness. You're sitting inside a handmade instrument, and the cold night is playing the outside strings. The smell of heated resin grows stronger where a split log burns. It mingles with soot and the dry dust of timber walls. Your fingertips carry a trace of rough wood. Your clothing has collected smoke, that patient traveller that attaches itself to everything. The atmosphere is dim, amber, and thick with stillness. Even your thoughts seem to move more slowly, as if they must duck under the low rafters. The cabin's craft is not polished enough to impress wealthy visitors, but it is intimate enough to teach you something. It teaches that shelter is never passive. Someone cut it, lifted it, sealed it, warmed it, patched it, and trusted it under a winter sky. Someone knew where to place the hearth, how to hang the door, and how much clay to press into a crack. Knowledge lives in the walls. You gaze toward the corner where darkness softens the notches into shadow. The cold presses outside, but the logs resist with all their plain strength. The fire leans and brightens. The roof creaks once, then settles. In this quiet glow, craftsmanship feels less like display and more like care under pressure. The cabin holds together not because life is easy, but because hands have repeatedly refused to let it fall apart. The door stays closed, yet the night keeps finding ways to enter, not with snow, because this is Georgia, and Georgia usually prefers cold rain, frost, and damp misery over neat northern drama. Still, the darkness outside feels sharp enough. It presses at the shutter, slides under the threshold, and whispers through the smallest cracks. The cabin answers with firelight, but the answer is quiet. Warmth does not shout. It simply remains, doing its best. You sit very still and begin to hear the yard beyond the walls. At first, it seems like one continuous hush. Then your ears adjust, just as your eyes adjusted to the fire. The sounds separate themselves patiently. Wind in the pines, a branch tapping against another branch, a mule shifting weight, the far creak of a gate, the thin, dry scrape of something loose moving across packed earth. The plantation after dark is not silent. It has merely lowered its voice. During daylight, work fills the air with commands, wheels, animals, axes, footsteps, and field sounds. At night, each noise becomes isolated and strangely important. A bucket knocked by the wind can sound like a visitor. A loose board can sound like a warning. Darkness gives every small thing a reputation it may not deserve. You lean closer to the hearth, listening through the flame. Fire has its own language too. It clicks, snaps, sighs, and settles. The logs release sap with tiny pops. Coals break inward with soft collapses. Ash shifts like dry sand. These sounds sit nearest your body, close and familiar. Beyond them, the outdoor noises feel larger, colder, and less willing to explain themselves. A plantation in 1840 Georgia would depend on a complex pattern of nighttime control. Enslaved people's movements were often restricted by patrols, passes, curfews, and local laws. Those rules varied by county and owner, but the aim was brutally clear. The night could offer rest, privacy, worship, visiting, resistance, or flight. So slaveholding society tried to watch it closely. Darkness had power, and power made others nervous. You let that fact rest beside the fire. The cabin's warmth is real, but it exists within a watched landscape. Outside, paths connect quarters, barns, fields, kitchens, wells, stables, and the main house. Every path carries habits and risks. Someone might cross the yard to tend an animal. Someone might carry water, return from an errand, or visit quietly. Someone might simply stand under the trees and breathe alone. A dog barks in the distance. 3 times this time. The sound travels unevenly through the woods. It fades, returns faintly, then disappears. You imagine the animal lifting its head towards something you cannot see. Dogs on plantations could guard property, warn households, track animals, or threaten people. They were ordinary creatures placed inside harsh systems, which is unfair to dogs and worse for humans. The wind changes direction. You hear it hit the cabin broadside, brushing over the logs with a low, rubbing sound. The shutter rattles once, then twice. A thin draught moves across the floor and touches your ankle again. It feels like cold water without wetness. You tuck your foot back beneath the stool. Very heroic. History is full of brave adjustments of the foot, From somewhere farther away comes the muted thump of a door closing. Then a pause. Then a voice, low and indistinct, carried by cold air. You cannot make out words. That makes the voice feel more private, not less. The tone rises slightly, falls again, and is gone. Human sound in darkness has a special weight. It reminds you that the plantation is not scenery. It is full of lives continuing beyond your sight. Night sounds also reveal distance. The nearest noises are crisp. The hearth, the stool, your sleeve against wool. The mid-distance noises are softened. Hooves in dirt, wood on wood, a hanging chain. The farthest noises arrive like memories. A faint call, a dog, wind crossing open ground. You begin to understand the yard by listening, as though sound has drawn a map in the dark. A quirky detail comes from the way some cabins used everyday objects to warn of movement. A bottle near a door, a loose latch, or a hanging bit of metal could make enough noise to wake a light sleeper. Not exactly a grand alarm system, of course. More like history's sleepy cousin of modern security. Still, in a world without electric lights. A small clink could matter. You notice a few pebbles and wood chips near the threshold. They crunch faintly when your heel brushes them. Their sound is tiny inside the cabin, but you imagine how loud such a thing might feel at midnight. The dark changes measurement. A whisper becomes a confession. A footstep becomes an announcement. Even breathing can seem too bold when everything around it has gone still. The cold outside carries smells through the gaps. Damp leaves, old straw, animal warmth from somewhere near the stable, smoke from another hearth, thinner and more distant than the smoke beside you. The scents layer themselves with the cabin's own atmosphere. You can almost tell where the wind has travelled by what it brings. Across the yard, through pine, past livestock, under fences, and finally through one rude little crack. The plantation bell, if there is one, is quiet now. Bells often marked work rhythms on large plantations, calling people to tasks or signalling changes in the day. At night, its silence feels almost suspicious. A bell sleeping is still a bell with authority waiting in its metal. You imagine it hanging in darkness, cold, mute, and patient. Morning will give it back its voice, whether anyone welcomes that or not. For now, another sound rises instead. Water drips somewhere outside, perhaps from a roof edge where frost has begun to gather and melt near escaping warmth. The drops fall slowly, one, then several breaths later, another. Each one strikes something hollow, maybe a bucket or a wooden trough. The repetition is calm at first, then slightly annoying, because even history had dripping things that refused to be poetic. You look toward the door. The latch remains steady. The firelight forms a trembling line beneath it, broken by uneven boards. The gap shows no movement, only darkness and cold. Still, you understand why people listened closely in such places. Weather could change, animals could break loose, patrols could pass, a roof could fail, a chimney could smoke, a child could cough. Night was not empty time. It required attention. Researchers still disagree about how much privacy enslaved families and skilled workers could claim within plantation cabins after dark. Some accounts describe shared domestic life, conversation, prayer, music, and visiting. Other evidence shows constant intrusion, surveillance, and disruption. The truth varied widely, and records often come from people with power. The quieter experiences are harder to recover. Silence in archives is not the same as silence in life. A soft tapping begins near the wall. You hold your breath. It comes again. Tap, pause, tap. Then you see the likely cause. A small loose peg or twig moving in the wind outside. The explanation is humble, almost disappointing. Darkness had prepared a mystery, and carpentry solved it. This is why imagination should not be left unsupervised near an old cabin at night. The fire throws a brighter flare across the room, and shadows leap briefly toward the rafters. For a moment, the interior sounds become sharper. The pothook creaks, a board clicks near the bench, the stool settles under you. Then the flames lower, and the outside returns, wind in pine needles, distant animal breath, the night arranging its pockets of sound. You hear hooves again, closer this time. A horse or mule shifts against a rail, perhaps restless in the cold. Leather creaks softly. A chain gives a dull clank. Animals feel weather deeply, and they are not subtle critics. A mule may object to cold with the full dignity of a creature convinced that humans have mismanaged the universe. On this point, the mule may have evidence. The smell of livestock grows faintly stronger, then fades. The wind must have turned past a stable or pen. You imagine warm animal bodies in dark stalls, steam rising from nostrils, straw rustling beneath hooves. Those structures, too, depend on carpentry, rails, doors, feed troughs, roof boards, and hinges all hold the plantation's working animals in place. A loose gate at night becomes everyone's problem by morning. Somewhere beyond the cabin, an owl calls. The sound is low, rounded, and hollow. It seems to come from the trees and the air at once. Owls belong to many strands of southern folklore, sometimes treated as omens, sometimes simply as night hunters with excellent timing. A person lying awake might hear one and wonder, is it only a bird? Usually, yes. But midnight enjoys raising unnecessary questions. You listen as the call repeats, then stops. The absence feels bigger than the sound. That's another trick of night. It makes silence active. You become aware of what has ceased. No dog now, no voice, no bell, only the fire, the wind, and your own breathing. The cabin seems to hold its breath with you. Although cabins are dramatic that way when the light is low, the atmosphere thickens with smoke and cold. Near the hearth, your face feels warm and dry. Your back feels the cooler air gathering behind you. The split between heat and chill becomes almost physical, like sitting between two seasons. You pull the blanket around your shoulders again. The wool rasps against your cheek. Its roughness comforts you because it is real, present, and close. Outside, the pine woods move as one body. The sound is not a roar, not yet, but a long, steady brushing. Pine needles do not rustle like broad leaves. They hiss softly, making the darkness seem full of breath. In that sound, you can sense the size of the land beyond the cleared yard. Fields may sleep under frost, but the woods remain awake and listening. You think of the cabin's smallness. 4 walls, 1 roof, 1 hearth, 1 person's reach. Against it stands the winter night, wide and layered with paths. Animals, rules, fears, chores, and hidden movement. The contrast is almost tender. A cabin does not defeat the dark. It negotiates with it. It offers a fire, a latch, a blanket, and enough wall to make listening possible. A faint footstep seems to pass somewhere outside. Then another. You wait, but no knock follows. Perhaps it was only an animal. Perhaps a branch dropped. Perhaps someone crossed the yard softly, careful with each step. The uncertainty lingers without drama. You do not need to solve it. The night is allowed to keep some of its secrets. Not every sound comes forward to introduce itself. The hearth settles lower, and the coals glow with a deeper red. Their sound becomes gentler, almost hidden. Outside, the wind eases for a moment, and the sudden calm feels enormous. You hear your own breath more clearly. You hear the faint pulse in your ears. You hear the cabin cooling at the edges. Then the wind returns, softer now, passing over the roof like a hand smoothing cloth. The noises beyond the door no longer feel like interruptions. They become part of the room's rhythm. Bark, creak, hiss, drip, clink, breath. Each one takes its place around the fire. You sit in the glow, wrapped in wool and wood smoke, While Georgia's cold night moves outside in slow circles, the cabin does not silence the world. It lets you hear it from shelter. The cabin grows quieter, and the question of skill begins to settle in the room. It rests among the tools, along the boards, and in the warmth held by the hearth. Skill is not loud here. It does not wear a fine coat or step proudly into a parlour. It hangs from pegs, sleeps under fingernails, gathers in the wrists, and hides inside a door that closes properly against the cold. Skill makes itself known by preventing trouble. You look again at the carpenter's hands in your imagination. They are not gentle hands in the decorative sense. They are working hands, marked by splinters, cracked skin, small scars, and the dark polish of tool handles. Yet they are precise. They know how hard to strike a chisel, how far to set a sawtooth, how to feel grain turning beneath a blade. Such hands carry thought in muscle. On a Georgia plantation in 1840, a skilled carpenter could hold unusual practical value. Buildings, wagons, fences, storage structures, wheels, doors, tools, and machinery all needed repair. Plantation agriculture was not only fields and crops, it was a constant battle against decay, weather, friction, rot, breakage, and inconvenient timing. A person who could build and mend was not easily replaced, even when the society around him denied his freedom. That is the hard contradiction glowing beside you. The carpenter may be respected for his trade while still controlled by law, custom, and force. His knowledge may bring slightly better clothing, more mobility, special tasks, or permission to work at different sites. It may also bring more demands, closer supervision, and fewer excuses for rest. Value is not the same as liberty. The difference matters. You lean back and feel the rough wool press between your shoulders. The log is cool through your clothing. It supports you without caring who you are, which is one modest advantage of walls. Human systems are rarely so neutral. The plantation measures people by race, status, labour, and ownership. A skilled worker may stand in a complicated position, needed and constrained, trusted with tools yet denied control over his own life. The firelight slides over the saw teeth, making them glimmer for a breath. Those teeth may cut boards for a main house window, then trim planks for a slave cabin, then repair a barn door that protects cotton. The same tool serves many purposes. The moral weight belongs not to the metal, but to the whirl that directs it. A saw is innocent. A system is not. You notice a small ledger scrap tucked near the bench, perhaps saved for measurements or accounts. Plantation owners and overseers often recorded skilled workers in account books, valuations, work lists, or hiring agreements. A carpenter could be listed as property, as labour, as an expense, or as a source of profit. Such records flatten a human life into lines and numbers. Paper can be very rude, especially when it thinks itself orderly. If the carpenter was hired out, his labour might be rented to another plantation, town workshop, or building project. Sometimes skilled enslaved workers were allowed to keep a small portion of earnings, though that depended entirely on local arrangements and the will of enslavers. Such arrangements could create small openings. They could also create another layer of exploitation. History enjoys offering a door, then reminding you who owns the key. The cabin air smells of hot ash, wool, and faintly oiled iron. You rub your thumb across your fingertips and imagine the grit of a day's labour there. Sawdust has a way of invading cuffs, collars, hair, and every fold of clothing. A carpenter might return with pine dust stuck to sweat, smelling of timber and sun even in winter. By evening, the body becomes a record of the day's materials. A quirky detail sits in the way people sometimes judged artisans by their tools. A sharp blade, a clean handle, and a well-kept edge could speak before a person did. Tools were expensive and deeply personal. Losing one could mean losing time, income, trust, or sleep. You may admire a fine tool chest today, But in this cabin, tool care is not a hobby. It is a very serious relationship. You imagine someone knocking at the door near dusk with a broken hinge in hand. The hinge might belong to a smokehouse, dairy room, or store shed. The visitor wants it fixed at once, naturally. Broken things often arrive with the confidence of emergencies. The carpenter studies the hinge, the wood, the split around the screw holes, and the problem beneath the problem. Repair begins with noticing what failed first. The noticing is knowledge. It is not the same as brute strength. Though strength is needed, skill means seeing the hidden stress inside a joint. It means knowing that green wood will shrink, that end grain drinks moisture, that a wheel spoke must meet force from more than one direction. It means understanding failure before failure becomes public and embarrassing. A good carpenter is part craftsman, part weather prophet, part exhausted philosopher. Mainstream history often emphasizes cotton as the engine of plantation wealth in the Deep South. That is true and important. Yet cotton fields depended on a built environment. Gins needed housing and repair, wagons carried bales, barns stored feed, fences shaped animal movement, roads, bridges, sheds, presses, and cabins all formed the wooden skeleton of plantation production. Without constant skilled work, the grand agricultural machine would wobble badly. You hear a soft click as a cooling tool shifts on its peg. It seems like a tiny agreement. The carpenter's labour reaches far beyond this room. His work may appear in a gate nobody praises, a roof nobody notices unless it leaks, and a chair someone uses without gratitude. Skilled labour often disappears into usefulness. When something works, people stop seeing the worker. That is very convenient for the comfortable. The question of status becomes difficult in such a room. A skilled carpenter might receive different assignments from field workers. He might move between buildings, handle valuable materials, or interact more often with overseers and owners. He might be consulted because his judgment mattered. Yet he could also be punished, sold, separated, or overruled. Skill might soften certain conditions. It did not break the structure of bondage. Different scholars interpret these skilled roles in different ways. Some emphasize agency, negotiation, economic importance, and craft pride. Others warn that focusing too warmly on skill can hide coercion and violence. Both concerns are necessary. A person can take pride in excellent work while still being forced into labour. Pride does not make bondage acceptable. Coercion does not erase intelligence, artistry, or dignity. You sit with that uncomfortable balance while the fire lowers. The room does not offer a simple answer, which is inconsiderate but accurate. Bedtime history may be gentle, yet the past remains stubbornly human. You can honour craftsmanship without softening slavery into a quaint workshop scene. The warmth beside you is real. The injustice around it is real too. Both truths share the same air. On a peg near the door hangs a measuring cord. It may be knotted at intervals, darkened with use, and stiff where dampness has touched it. A cord like that could help lay out a fence line, mark a wall, or measure repeated pieces. Such tools make the body into part of a larger geometry. Step, stretch, mark, cut, fit. The carpenter moves through space, turning intention into structure. You wonder who taught him. Perhaps another enslaved artisan gave instruction in spare moments. Perhaps he learned by watching a white carpenter hired for plantation work. Perhaps a father, uncle, older worker, or neighbour passed down small techniques when nobody thought to record them. Perhaps he learned because something broke and nobody else could fix it. Necessity is a harsh teacher, but it has a very full classroom. The cabin's atmosphere thickens as the night deepens. Smoke clings near the rafters in a bluish veil. The smell of ash lies low and dry. Your fingers trace the edge of the stool seat, feeling a shallow groove where a tool slipped during shaping. Imperfections show the human hand more clearly than perfect surfaces do. A machine can make sameness. A tired person makes a mark. A little block of hardwood rests near the hearth, perhaps used to test a blade or support small work. It has cuts on every side, as if it has been volunteered for too many tasks. Poor little block. Some objects spend their whole lives being useful in ways nobody celebrates. Yet such scraps matter. A carpenter's world is full of helpers too plain for memory, and history is crowded with them. The labour hierarchy on plantations could be intensely specific. Field hands, domestic workers, drivers, artisans, children, elders, and specialised workers occupied different roles. They all lived under the larger violence of enslavement where slavery existed. Carpentry belonged to the skilled trades, along with blacksmithing, coopering, masonry, shoemaking, and other work. These trades could shape daily experience, but they did not remove vulnerability. A title could not protect the whole person. You look toward the bedstead and think of rest as another form of status. Who sleeps through the night? Who rises first? Who's called out for repairs during rain? Who owns the time between darkness and dawn? A skilled carpenter may be needed at inconvenient hours, because a broken wheel does not politely wait for breakfast. Expertise can become a chain of responsibility, even when the body longs for stillness. The wind presses the shutter, and a draught slips across the floor. You notice how quickly the cabin's comfort depends on earlier repairs. If the latch holds, the room stays warmer. If the roof holds, the blanket remains dry. If the chimney draws, eyes do not burn too badly. The carpenter's skill turns into sleep for other people. That is a strange kind of power, quiet and easily taken for granted. In towns and some rural areas, free black artisans also worked in the South, though their rights were restricted and their lives shaped by hostile laws. Their presence complicates any simple picture of skill and race in the period. Skilled black carpenters, enslaved and free, helped build much of the southern world. Many of their names remain missing from the structures they made. The buildings stayed, the credit often wandered off. You feel the rough blanket around your shoulders and consider how much knowledge never reaches books. The angle of a clean cut, the pressure needed to drive a peg without splitting timber, the smell of wood that has begun to rot inside, the sound of a wheel that will fail soon. These are forms of intelligence, not lesser because they are practical. The past was built by such intelligence. Board by board, a slow ember collapses, and the room briefly brightens. The tools shine like thoughts along the wall. For a moment, you sense the carpenter not as a background figure, but as the centre of this small world of making and mending. His skill gathers in every object within reach. It lives in the door that holds, the stool that balances, the shelf that waits level, and the roof still standing above you. Then the light softens again. The cabin returns to its low orange hush. Outside, the plantation remains wide, cold, and unequal. Inside, the marks of craft remain close enough to touch. You sit among them quietly, feeling how skill can create dignity under pressure, value without freedom, and beauty inside a world that did not deserve the hands that shaped it. Small details begin to claim your attention, because cabin life is made of them. The grand shape of the room has already settled around you. Fire, bed, bench, walls, roof, tools, and door form the main arrangement. Yet the longer you sit in the glow, the more the little things appear. A peg worn shiny by a hanging coat, a crack stuffed with cloth, a small stone set beneath a table leg to stop its wobble. Survival has a talent for becoming specific. You shift nearer the bedstead and study it in the low firelight. The frame is simple, joined with pegs and rope. The rope crosses beneath the mattress in a rough pattern, holding up the ticking stuffed with corn shucks, straw, or leaves. If the rope loosens, the bed sags. If the stuffing flattens, the body finds every hard line beneath it. Comfort here requires maintenance, naturally. Even sleep has chores. You press one hand lightly against the mattress. It answers with a dry rustle. The sound is soft but busy, like a field mouse giving a lecture. Corn shuck mattresses could be noisy, uneven, and surprisingly warm when properly filled. They also needed airing, turning, and refreshing. A bed was not simply bought and forgotten. It was assembled from season, harvest, fabric, labour, and repeated adjustment. A mainstream truth of rural life in 1840 Georgia is that many domestic objects were handmade, repaired, or repurposed. Store-bought goods existed, especially for those with money and access to markets. But everyday cabins depended heavily on making do. Cloth was patched, furniture was mended, containers were reused. A household's comfort often came from small acts of repair performed again and again. You notice a folded shirt near the bed, patched at the elbow with cloth of a different shade. The stitches are neat but not decorative. They hold. That is enough. The patch feels slightly raised under your fingers, its edges softened by washing and wear. Clothing in a working cabin carries the body's history: sweat, smoke, mud, rain, sawdust, and sleep all leave their signatures in the fabric. Near the shirt lies a needle case, perhaps made from bone, wood, or rolled cloth. It seems tiny in a room full of axes and saws, but it matters just as much. A split seam can chill the body, a torn cuff can catch on work. A missing button can turn into a nuisance that follows someone all day with great dedication. The needle is a small tool with a very sharp sense of importance. You look at the floor near the hearth. A pair of shoes or rough boots rests there, turned toward the fire without being too close. Leather hardens when soaked and cracks when dried too fiercely. The owner knows this, so the boots are placed with care. They smell of damp earth, smoke, and old labour. One sole has been patched. The repair is not pretty, but neither is walking barefoot over frozen ground. A quirky domestic trick appears in the draft-stopping cloth tucked low between two wall logs. Rags, moss, corn shucks, scraps of wool, or old paper might be pushed into cracks before clay was added, or when cold returned through a gap. There is a certain comedy in fighting winter with yesterday's sleeve. Yet a small blocked crack can change a night. Warmth is often defended by humble things. The cabin storage is vertical because the floor is precious. Pegs hold coats, bags, cords, tools, and perhaps a small bundle of dried food. A shelf above shoulder height keeps items away from damp, dirt, and ambitious rodents. Mice are not impressed by human property rights. They conduct investigations. They file reports with their teeth, so anything valuable must be hung, sealed, covered, or watched. You hear a faint scratch in the wall, or perhaps only the fire settling. For a moment, you imagine a mouse pausing inside the chinking, whiskers twitching. Cabins had to negotiate with insects, rodents, dampness, smoke, and cold. The boundaries between indoors and outdoors were never absolute. A house kept nature at a respectful distance, when nature felt like being respectful, which was not always. A small broom leans in the corner. It may be made from twigs, broomcorn, or bound straw. Its handle is crooked, but it will sweep shavings from the floor and ash from the hearth. Sweeping is one of those chores that never becomes finished. Dust returns. Ash returns. Mud enters on shoes with the confidence of an invited guest. Cleanliness in a working cabin is not a state. It is a repeated negotiation. You imagine evening tidying done slowly after labour, shavings gathered for kindling, coals banked, tools lifted from the floor, food covered, boots set to dry, blanket shaken, water checked, door latched. Each act is small, and none feels historic alone. Together, they make a night survivable. The past is often built from actions too ordinary to impress a monument. On the mantel, a tiny twist of thread lies beside a button. The button may be bone, wood, shell, or metal. It waits with the patience of a little moon. Buttons seem minor until one is gone, and then the whole garment develops an attitude. You smile softly at that. Human dignity is sometimes dependent on objects smaller than a fingernail, which feels both humbling and mildly ridiculous. A wooden box sits beneath the bed. You draw it out in your mind and imagine its contents. A spare cloth, a bit of tobacco, a letter if literacy and circumstance allowed it, a comb, a small keepsake, perhaps nothing so romantic, just pegs, cord, and a folded rag. Personal storage in such a cabin might be limited, but private objects still mattered. Even one small possession could hold memory. Historians continue to debate the degree of personal privacy available in plantation cabins, especially where enslaved people lived under observation. Some narratives suggest cabins became spaces for family life, storytelling, religion, music, and rest. Other records show overcrowding, intrusion, and control. Both realities could exist in different places, or even in the same place at different times. Privacy was often fragile, negotiated, and never guaranteed. You sit with that fragility while the wool blanket presses against your shoulders. Its fibers scratch gently at your neck. The blanket may have been issued, traded, purchased, made, inherited, or carried from another place. Its weave catches smoke and body warmth. It is not soft like a dream. It is soft like endurance, which is different. It warms because it must, not because it wishes to impress anyone. Near the door hangs a small pouch. It might hold nails, bits, tobacco, flint, or personal items kept away from the floor. The pouch's leather is cracked, and its drawstring is darkened by fingers. You imagine reaching for it before stepping into a cold morning, checking its contents by touch. A person in this cabin cannot rely on abundance. Knowing exactly what remains becomes a quiet form of control. The hearth itself has household habits. Ash is not merely waste. Wood ash could be used in making lye for soap, in cleaning, and sometimes in garden practices. Fine ash might help bank coals through the night. A deep ash bed protects embers, keeping them alive until morning. The fire is not allowed to vanish casually. Starting a new flame is work, and work already has plenty of friends. You watch the coals closely. Some are covered in grey ash, but red shines beneath. The surface looks dull until it is stirred. Then heat appears, hidden but present. That is a useful image for this room, though one should not become too poetic near hot coals. A cabin's life also hides beneath plain surfaces. A patched sleeve, banked ember, and hanging pouch can carry whole histories quietly. A small tin or gourd cup rests on a shelf. Its rim may be dented because cups fall and people sigh. You imagine cool water in it, tasting faintly of wood from the bucket. Water at night serves many purposes: drinking, washing hands, dampening a cloth, soothing a cough, and guarding against a spark. A cabin with fire must always remember that warmth is helpful until it becomes enthusiastic. The fire's light reveals a dark stain on the floor near the hearth. It may be from spilled grease, damp boots, or years of ash and traffic. Floors collect evidence without explaining themselves. Every stain is a possible story, and most stories are lost. That uncertainty is part of the atmosphere. The room is full of traces, but not all traces can be translated. You notice a strip of cloth hanging near the chimney, perhaps drying. It moves slightly when the draft shifts. The smell of damp fabric joins the smoke. Sharp and earthy, drying indoors adds moisture to the air, but it also risks smoke scent settling deeper. Still, wet cloth in winter is unpleasant company. A cabin must choose between imperfect options, which is basically domestic history in one sentence. A bit of cord is tied around a chair leg, strengthening a weak joint. The repair is practical and slightly awkward. It makes the chair look bandaged. Many objects here seem bandaged in one way or another. A stitched sleeve, patched boot, chinked wall, tied chair, mended hinge, and banked fire. The whole cabin is a lesson in keeping things going past their first failure. Your gaze moves to the threshold. Dirt is gathered there in a thin line, carried in by shoes. The threshold is a boundary, but also a collector. It receives mud, leaves, ash, and cold air. It knows every entrance. In some folk traditions, thresholds held special meaning, marking the crossing between danger and shelter, outside and inside, public and private. Even without superstition, a threshold deserves respect. It works hard. The quirky side of sleeping arrangements appears in pest control. Herbs, smoke, cedar chips, frequent airing, and plain human vigilance could help discourage insects in bedding, although success was not guaranteed. Bedbugs, fleas, and lice were familiar enemies in many historical households, rich and poor alike. The past was not always cosy. Sometimes it itched. That is not soothing, perhaps, but it is honest. You choose to imagine the bedding freshly shaken and warmed near the fire. The mattress rustles under an imagined hand. The blanket is laid out to catch heat but not sparks. The pillow, if there is one, is small and compressed. It may be stuffed with feathers, rags, moss, or other available material. A pillow's value depends greatly on how tired the head becomes. After hard labour, even a folded coat may qualify. The room contains no unnecessary decoration, yet it is not without personality. A carved notch on the bedpost, a carefully smoothed stool, a shelf set at just the right height, a tool peg placed where muscle memory reaches. These choices make the cabin personal. Poverty and coercion do not erase taste, preference, or ingenuity. People still arrange, improve, adapt, and care where they can. You hear the broom bristle shift slightly, perhaps moved by a draught. The sound is faint, dry, and feathery. Outside, the wind has slowed, leaving the cabin's small interior noises more noticeable. The room now seems less like a rough shelter, and more like a system of tiny decisions. Each object has been placed because some need demanded it. Each repair answers a problem that once interrupted sleep. The scholarly uncertainty returns in the quiet spaces between objects. How many such cabins contained personal keepsakes? How often were beds shared? How much did skilled workers alter their own rooms? The answers are scattered across archaeology, oral histories, plantation records, and surviving buildings. Many details remain uncertain because the people who knew them best were rarely allowed to write the record. Absence can be another kind of evidence. You sit back by the hearth and let the little things settle around you. The patched cloth, the broom, the boots, the cup, the cord, the box, the bank dash, and the draft-stuffed crack all seem to glow with ordinary importance. They do not make the room easy. They make it livable. That is a quieter achievement, and maybe a deeper one. The fire lowers again, and the cabin's details blur into softness. Still, you know they are there. The needle waits, the boots dry, the blanket holds warmth, the broom leans patiently in the corner, already aware that tomorrow will bring more dust. You breathe in smoke, wool, clay, and winter air, feeling the humble intelligence of a life arranged around need, repair, and rest. The hearth has settled into a softer glow and conversation seems to rise from it. Not loud conversation, not the kind that fills a dining room and knocks against polished plates. This is a lower kind, suited to smoke-dark rafters and tired shoulders. It is the sort of talk that begins after the work of eating is done, when hands are still, bowls are put aside, and the night outside has grown too cold to welcome unnecessary wandering. You sit close to the fire and the room feels ready for voices. The coals breathe red beneath a skin of ash. Shadows gather at the corners, but they do not feel empty. The stool, bedstead, tools, and hanging coat seem almost like listeners. Even the rough walls appear to lean inward, holding sound carefully. A cabin with one room does not waste words. It keeps them close. You imagine a quiet remark about the weather first. Weather is the safest old subject, because it belongs to everyone and bays no overseer. The cold is worse near the creek. The wind has shifted. Frost will stiffen the ground by morning. A roof patch may not hold if rain follows. Such comments sound ordinary, but they carry knowledge. Weather shapes labour, sleep, hunger, travel, illness, and repairs. A person by the hearth might speak of a wagon wheel that groaned all afternoon. Someone else might mention a mule refusing a gate with theatrical commitment. The mule, as usual, may be innocent or guilty. History rarely gives mules proper representation. The joke would be small, perhaps only a breath through the nose. Laughter in a tired room does not need to be large to matter. Mainstream accounts of plantation life show that cabins and hearths often became spaces for oral exchange. Enslaved people passed along news, warnings, family memory, religious ideas, work knowledge, songs, humour, and stories. Much of that life was never written down by those who lived it. Yet oral culture preserved meaning, skill, identity, and resistance in ways official records rarely understood. The spoken word could shelter what paper ignored. You listen as if the walls remember. A voice might tell of a road washed out near the river. Another might speak of a trader seen near the crossing. Someone could mention a birth, a sickness, a punishment, a prayer meeting, a wedding promise, or a rumour from town. News travelled by mouth, step, wagon, market, church, and work assignment. It moved slowly sometimes, then suddenly faster than the authority preferred. The fire makes every face seem half hidden. That is useful for storytelling. In flame and shadow, uncertainty becomes a companion instead of a problem. A speaker can lower the voice, stretch a pause, and let the listener do some of the work. The cabin smells of ash, warm wool, and old wood. Outside, pine branches hiss faintly. Inside, speech can move like smoke, curling toward memory. A quirky tidbit belongs to folk tales about clever animals, especially rabbits, foxes, and tricksters. Versions of these stories, shaped by African, native, and European influences, circulated widely through southern oral traditions. The small creature often survives by wit rather than strength. That is not exactly subtle, which may be the point. A rabbit cannot defeat a fox in a wrestling match, so it becomes inconveniently intelligent. You imagine such a story told quietly near the hearth. The rabbit gets caught, talks too much, escapes anyway, and leaves the powerful creature looking foolish. Someone listening smiles without showing too much. Humour can be a small lantern. It does not change the whole night, but it makes a circle of light where people can see one another. Even a soft laugh may carry defiance when life has narrowed the room. The carpenter's own stories might lean toward wood and work. He could describe a beam that split at the worst moment, because beams enjoy dramatic timing. He might explain how a certain gate failed because someone used green wood too soon. A younger listener might learn from the tale without being formally taught. That is how practical knowledge often travels, wrapped in complaint, memory, and mild mockery. You hear the imagined cadence of a voice measuring the room, not hurried, not theatrical. A sentence begins, slows near the middle, and lands gently. Bedtime talk has its own craft. Words must not stir the body too sharply. They must pass the time, share the burden, and leave enough quiet for the fire. Good hearth speech does not demand attention. It invites it, then lets it rest. Family memory might enter too. A place remembered from another county, a mother's way of cooking greens, a grandfather who could read tracks in soft mud, a person sold away, spoken of carefully because grief has ears, a child's question, asked when adults hope for silence. These stories do not need written dates to be history. They carry location, feeling, kinship, loss, and stubborn continuity. Historians still argue over how accurately later collected folk tales preserve the stories told in cabins during the 1840s. Some tales were written down decades later, often filtered through collectors, editors, and unequal power. Yet scholars also recognise deep continuities in themes, characters, language patterns, and moral structure. The exact wording may be uncertain. The cultural importance is not easily dismissed. You notice how the room shapes privacy. A one-room cabin can hold tenderness and tension together. There is no separate parlour for cheerful talk and separate chamber for sorrow. Everything happens near the same fire. A practical joke, a whispered prayer, a hard memory, and a child's sleepy question may share one smoky space. The hearth does not sort emotions neatly. It receives what the evening brings. A low spiritual might be hummed rather than sung fully. The sound would sit beneath speech, soft enough not to carry too far. Religious expression among enslaved communities could include Christian themes, African-influenced practices, ring shouts, prayer meetings, and coded meanings. Belief could comfort, gather people, and challenge the claims of enslavers. Faith by the fire was not merely private feeling. It could be a way of imagining freedom. You let the imagined hum fill the cabin without words. It rises with the smoke, then settles under the rafters. Your chest feels the vibration more than your ears do. The sound is low, warm, and tired. It asks nothing from you except stillness. In the glow, even the tools seem gentler, as if saws and chisels have agreed not to interrupt. Rumour might follow song. Rumour has always been an energetic traveller, especially when official truth is stingy. A court case, a sale, a runaway notice, a change in an owner's debts, a new road, a preacher passing through, a crop failure somewhere west. Rumour can frighten, mislead, protect, or prepare. It is not always reliable, but it is rarely meaningless. People listen because information can become survival. The fire pops sharply, and the sound resets the room. You smell resin burning. A spark lifts bright and brief, then dies before reaching the chimney. Sparks are little warnings disguised as beauty. Someone might glance toward the bed cover or the drying cloth, just to be sure. Conversation pauses around such practical checks. In a cabin, safety and storytelling take turns. You imagine a child half asleep on the mattress, hearing only pieces of adult talk. The wheel, the creak, the sail, the rabbit, the frost. The child may not understand all meanings, but the tones remain. Warm voices become part of memory before words become clear. Many people first learn history that way, not from a book, but from tired adults speaking over fire while the night waits outside. There may also be silence that carries more than speech. Someone thinks of a person missing from the room. Someone worries about tomorrow's labour. Someone counts remaining meal or firewood in the mind. Someone listens for footsteps. Silence is not emptiness. It can be caution, grief, prayer, exhaustion, or peace. The cabin allows many kinds, and the listener must be gentle with them. A small charm or protective object might rest near the threshold, perhaps unnoticed by some and deeply meaningful to others. Archaeologists studying sites of enslaved communities have found items that may relate to spiritual practices, protection, memory, or African diasporic traditions. Interpretation is careful work, and not every object has one clear meaning. Still, a hidden item can suggest that people shaped unseen worlds alongside visible ones. You glance toward the door and imagine such a hidden presence. A shell, bead, nail, coin, pierced object, or bundle could hold meaning beyond its material value. The cabin, then, is not only a shelter for the body, it may also be guarded by belief, habit, and memory. That thought changes the threshold. It becomes more than a crack where cold enters. It becomes a line watched by the living imagination. Talk returns to craft. Someone asks how to keep a board from warping. The answer may involve seasoning, grain, weight, and patience. Someone asks why a chair squeaks. The answer is that the chair has opinions, apparently. Then comes the practical reason, a loose joint or shrinking peg. Humour makes instruction easier to bear. Nobody enjoys being corrected by a stool, especially not after supper. The carpenter's stories may include named places: Savannah roads, Macon markets, a sawmill near a creek, a plantation across the county where the barns are badly kept. Place names anchor the room to a wider world. Even when movement is restricted, knowledge travels. A skilled worker may know roads, timber stands, water crossings, households, and reputations. Geography lives in the mind as much as in the feet. You feel the wool blanket growing warmer around you. The air near the hearth is dry, but the far wall keeps a trace of damp. The smell of smoke thickens whenever the fire shifts. Your eyes sting lightly. The imagined voices continue at the edge of hearing, woven with crackle and wind. The atmosphere is not theatrical. It is intimate, restrained, and human. One story might turn toward an old storm. The night the creek rose, the time a pine fell across the road, the year frost damaged early planting. Weather memories matter in agricultural worlds. They become warnings, jokes, and measures of endurance. Someone says it was colder than this. Someone else disagrees. Of course they do. Memory has always enjoyed correcting itself in company. Another tale might mention a travelling carpenter or a hired artisan who showed a clever joint. Skills spread through movement, even forced movement. A new technique could arrive in a person's hands, not in a manual. It might be copied, adjusted, and remembered because it solved a problem. The history of craft often moves quietly, from hand to eye to hand, without asking permission from formal institutions. The coals settle again, and the voices in your mind become slower. The fire no longer throws sharp light. It gives a steady pulse, as though the hearth itself is listening. Outside, an owl calls once, far away. Inside, the last story of the evening stretches toward its ending. It does not rush. Stories told near sleep know better than to slam a door. You sense how fact and memory blur in this glow. A real event becomes shaped by repeated telling. A joke attaches itself to a difficult day. A warning becomes a proverb. A name survives because someone says it often enough. In a world where official records often ignored or distorted lives, speech could hold what mattered most. Not perfectly, not safely, but stubbornly. The room becomes a vessel for that stubbornness. The walls hold smoke and sound. The floor holds footsteps. The hearth holds flame. The people within such a place hold one another in words, pauses, laughter, songs, rumours, and guarded truths. You sit quietly in the amber dark, hearing not one single tale, but a whole soft web of human exchange. At last, the imagined voices fade into the fire's low breathing. The cabin returns to small noises. A coal shifts. A board clicks. The wind brushes the shutter and moves on. Yet the room no longer feels empty. Stories have warmed it in another way. They have filled the spaces between the tools and the bed, between the door and the hearth, between the cold night and the listening heart. The room grows heavier with night, but work has not fully released its grip. That is the trouble with practical skill. It follows a person indoors, sits near the hearth, and begins making lists. A body may be tired enough for sleep, yet the mind still measures boards, counts nails, remembers loose hinges, and imagines rain finding a roof seam. Rest comes slowly when tomorrow has already started whispering. You sit with your hands folded near the warmth, watching the coals sink lower. The fire no longer leaps high against the chimney. It glows in a quieter, redder language. A log's outer shell has fallen away, leaving a dark shape lit from within. The smell has changed too. Less resin now, more ash, dry oak, and the faint mineral scent of heated stone. Near the workbench, one unfinished piece waits in shadow. It might be a wagon spoke, a door rail, a shutterboard, or a replacement handle. Its purpose is not entirely visible, but its unfinishedness is. There is something restless about an unfinished object. It seems to remind the room that sleep is only an interruption, not a solution. Very inconsiderate of wood. Honestly, a plantation carpenter in 1840 Georgia could be needed at almost any hour when equipment failed. Wagons, fences, barns, smokehouses, cotton gin houses, and storage buildings were all vulnerable to weather and use. Agricultural life depended on timing. A broken wheel during hauling, a damaged gate during cold rain, or a leaking roof over stored goods could become urgent quickly. Wood problems rarely wait with good manners. You lean toward the bench and notice a short list scratched onto a thin shaving or spare board. Perhaps it is only measurements, not words. Marks can stand for length, width, count, or sequence. If literacy was restricted or dangerous, marks still carried meaning. A notch can remember what paper might not safely say. A carpenter's memory could be assisted by lines, cuts, pegs, and arranged pieces. Outside, the cold tightens. You can hear it in the sharper creak of the walls. The roof gives a small ticking sound where frost forms and the last heat escapes. The shutter shifts, then settles. Each noise might be harmless. Each might become tomorrow's repair. That is the carpenter's curse. The house speaks, and he understands too much. You imagine lying down but remaining awake, hearing a gate knock in the wind. One knock could be ignored. 2 knocks might enter a dream. 3 knocks would become a thought. By the 4th, the mind has already pictured a loose latch, a missing peg, a split batten, and some annoyed person expecting it fixed before breakfast. Expertise is not restful. It has excellent hearing. A quirky detail of night work appears in lighting. Small jobs might be done by firelight, candle, pine knot torch, or a simple grease lamp. But each light had problems. Candles were valuable. Pine knots smoked. Lamps needed fuel. Firelight flickered and distorted measurements. Trying to cut a straight line by poor light is a fine way to meet disappointment. The dark is not famous for accuracy. The cabin holds a small stub of candle, unlit and saved. You look at it with new respect. It is not merely a romantic glow waiting for poetry. It is a ration tool. Light itself must be managed. To burn the candle for comfort might feel pleasant, but a needed repair or sudden search could demand it later. Even brightness has to earn its place. You hear the pot cooling near the hearth with tiny metallic ticks. The sound resembles a distant insect. Your eyes move from pot to tools, tools to door, door to blanket. Everything has a condition: whole, cracked, dull, sharp, dry, damp, mended, failing, usable, nearly gone. A working mind sorts the room without meaning to. It reads objects as promises and threats. Scholars still debate how skilled enslaved workers balanced plantation demands with personal work, family needs, and possible independent earning. Some records suggest limited opportunities for after-hours labour, market exchange, or craft projects. Other evidence points to exhausting workloads and tight control. The balance varied widely. What remains clear is that time was contested, and control over one's own hours carried deep meaning. You feel that meaning in the quiet. The hours after dark might be the only time available to mend a shoe, repair a personal item, make a small gift, sharpen a tool, tend a family need, or simply sit without command. Yet fatigue would stand nearby, tapping its foot. The body has limits, even when necessity pretends otherwise. Sleep is not laziness. Sleep is repair. A small wooden handle lies near the hearth, partly shaped but unfinished. It may belong to a file or awl. You pick it up in your imagination and feel its roughness. One side fits the hand better than the other. It needs more shaving, more smoothing, perhaps a hole burned or bored to fit the tang. Such work could be personal and necessary. A handle turns sharp metal into a usable companion. The firelight reveals curls of wood scattered under the bench. Some are fresh and pale, others are older, grey with dust. Their dry edges catch the glow like small sleeping shells. A night job could begin with gathering these shavings into a safer pile. Fire loves disorder a little too much. A cabin full of wood, cloth, ash, and sparks demands caution every minute it offers comfort. You listen for the smallest changes. A coal rolling, a draft deepening, a faint hiss from damp bark. The atmosphere feels dense, as if the room is wrapped in several layers. Smoke near the roof, warmth near the hearth, cold near the floor, darkness in the corners. The body sits among these layers, reading them without words. A cabin teaches alertness even when it invites rest. The plantation's winter worries are not limited to cold. Animals need feed and shelter. Stored crops must stay dry. Tools must be protected from rust. Fences must hold hungry livestock. People must remain healthy enough for labour demanded of them. Illness, exposure, poor rations, and exhaustion could turn winter into a dangerous season. Mild compared with northern winters does not mean gentle. Damp cold has its own talent for cruelty. You draw the blanket closer and feel the wool scrape pleasantly against your wrist. The fire warms one cheek while the other cools. Your eyelids grow heavy, but thoughts keep crossing the room. Did the roof patch hold? Is there enough dry kindling for morning? Did the auger bit get wiped clean? Is that split in the door widening? Practical questions do not care that you are sleepy. A strange little comfort comes from order. The tools hang where they belong. The bowl is set aside. The fire is banked. The door is latched. The boots are drying at a safe distance. These small arrangements quiet the mind. They cannot solve the whole world, which is rude of them, but they reduce the number of immediate emergencies. Sometimes peace is just fewer things about to go wrong. You imagine the carpenter checking the saw one last time, not using it, only touching the handle, making sure it is dry. Iron rusts when neglected, and neglect can arrive in one cold night. He might wipe a blade with an oily rag, hang it teeth down or safely aside, and leave tomorrow's board where he will see it at first light. Preparation is a message sent to the morning. Mainstream history often shows plantations as agricultural units, but they were also repair economies. Their operation depended on constant upkeep by enslaved workers and other labourers, including many whose names were not preserved. Carpenters, blacksmiths, coopers, seamstresses, cooks, drivers, nurses, and field hands all kept the system moving. Official documents might praise owners' wealth, while the true maintenance lived in other people's hands. You gaze at the rough door and imagine a knock in bad weather. A fence rail has come loose. A cart tongue has cracked. A shed roof is lifting. Perhaps the carpenter must rise, take a tool, wrap himself against the cold, and step into mud by torchlight. Night work would make the world feel smaller and harsher. The circle of light would show only the next task and the next breath. There is a particular smell to outdoor repair in cold, damp air. Wet wood, mud, animal hide, smoke from a carried brand, iron chilled until it feels almost hostile. Your fingers would stiffen around the tool. Breath would fog in front of your face. The stars, if visible, would be indifferent in the way stars always are. Beautiful, distant, and completely useless with a broken hinge. Inside the cabin, the idea of that cold makes the hearth feel more precious. The coals are low, but they are yours for this moment. Heat touches your knees. Smoke softens the rafters. The bed waits in shadow, narrow but available. You understand why people banked fires carefully. Morning flame meant less labour, but night coals meant protection against the deep chill before dawn. A small pile of fuel sits near the hearth, sorted by size, larger sticks on one side, splinters and shavings on the other. Such sorting is practical wisdom. A sleepy person cannot argue with damp wood at dawn and expect dignity. Dry kindling is a kindness given to one's future self. It is also the sort of tiny triumph that never appears in grand histories, though it should. You notice the carpenter's square again, hanging perfectly still. It represents straightness, but the world around it is uneven. Floors dip, logs bow, rules bend for powerful people. Weather ignores plans. The square keeps insisting on right angles anyway. There is something almost brave about that. A small tool telling a crooked world, no, this is the line. Historians remain uncertain about the exact interior arrangements of many plantation artisans' cabins, because few survive unchanged. Archaeology, written accounts, surviving structures, and comparison with rural buildings offer clues. Yet alterations, decay, and incomplete records leave many gaps. The missing details matter. A shelf's height, a bed's location, or a work area's size could reveal how labour and domestic life shared space. You let that uncertainty soften rather than frustrate you. Not knowing everything allows the room to remain partly shadowed. As real rooms are at night, the fire does not show every corner. The archive does not keep every voice. You learn what you can from objects, sounds, and patterns. Then you sit respectfully with what cannot be recovered. Sleep is easier when the mind stops demanding total possession. The unfinished handle near the hearth seems less restless now. It will wait. Wood is patient when humans are not forcing it into deadlines. The tools on the wall are silent. The floor has stopped creaking beneath you. Outside, the wind moves more slowly, brushing the cabin rather than striking it. The night has not ended, but its urgency has lowered. You imagine the carpenter stretching sore fingers, feeling the ache left by the day. Hands that shape wood also carry swelling, stiffness, and small pains. Winter makes joints less forgiving. A person might hold palms toward the fire, turning them like bread, warming one side and then the other. The skin tightens in heat. The knuckles loosen. The body thanks the fire without ceremony. A final practical worry lingers near the door. Fire must be kept alive, but not allowed to escape. Sparks must be watched. Cloth must be moved away. Ash must cover coals, but not smother them fully. The hearth is a companion with conditions. Treat it well, and it gives warmth. Ignore it, and it becomes a disaster with excellent confidence. Nobody should trust a bored ember. You watch as ash is drawn gently over the brightest coals. The red glow dims, but does not vanish. Heat hides beneath grey softness, waiting for morning breath and kindling. The cabin darkens by degrees. The tools become outlines. The bed becomes a low shape. The door becomes a darker rectangle inside darkness. Work's voice fades, not because every problem is solved, but because the body cannot carry all of them awake. Your thoughts slow at last. The roof may hold, the latch may hold, the fire may hold, the morning may bring its own repairs, but they are not yet in your hands. For now, the night work is only watchfulness, and even watchfulness grows sleepy beside a covered bed of coals. You sit in the dim red hush, feeling winter outside and labour inside, while rest comes nearer with patient steps. The cabin has become a darker place now, but not an unfriendly one. The fire is low, hidden beneath a soft cover of ash, with red points showing through like sleepy eyes. The room no longer glows broadly. Instead, it glimmers in small places. A tool edge, a bowl rim, a corner of the hearthstone, the curve of a hanging handle. Everything else has eased into shadow, as if the cabin has decided to stop explaining itself. You move toward the bedstead slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet. The floorboards answer with only one mild complaint. That seems fair. They have been working all day too. The mattress waits with its dry, whispering fill, uneven but warm where the blanket has held some of the hearth's heat. You sit on the edge and feel the ropes give beneath you, stretching with a tired creak. The bed is narrow, and the room is coldest near the floor. Still, it offers what the night requires. A place to set down the body, a blanket to pull close, a few embers to guard the air. The cabin's comforts are not luxurious, but they are exact. Each one meets a need directly, without fuss, polish, or embroidered speeches about hospitality. You lie back and hear the mattress rustle under your shoulders. The sound is close, dry, and oddly soothing. The blanket scratches at your chin, then settles under your hands. It smells of smoke, wool, and the faint dust of storage. Your feet find a warmer place beneath the fold. Near the hearth, a coal shifts softly, and the room brightens for one slow breath. A mainstream fact rests quietly with you. In the plantation south of 1840, cabins varied greatly in size, material, and condition, but many were plain one-room dwellings built for function rather than comfort. They held cooking, sleeping, storage, family life, and sometimes skilled work in cramped space. Their walls sheltered human resilience, but they also stood within a system that denied basic freedom to millions. You let that truth remain present without making the night harsh. It belongs here. This cabin cannot be turned into a harmless dream. It is warm, smoky, handmade, intimate, and tied to injustice. The person who sleeps here may know pride in skill, care for tools, affection for family, and deep weariness. He may also know coercion, surveillance, uncertainty, and loss. The room holds all of it. The fire settles again. Heat still reaches you, though faintly. It comes in waves, touching your face and then withdrawing. The opposite wall is hidden now, but you remember its logs, their clay seams, their axe marks, and their patient strength. In darkness, memory becomes another kind of light. You no longer need to see the whole room. You know enough of its shape to feel held. A quirky little sleeping habit belongs to the banking of coals. Ash drawn over embers can keep heat alive until morning, if done carefully. Too much air, and the fire burns away. Too little, and it dies. The hearth must be tucked in almost like a child, which is surprisingly tender for a pile of dangerous heat. Human beings have always had complicated relationships with useful hazards. You hear the wind move over the roof in a long, soft pass. It no longer rattles sharply. It glides. Perhaps the air has steadied. Perhaps your body has become too heavy to mind it. The shutter gives one small tap, then rests. Outside. Frost may be whitening the yard, silvering rails, stiffening mud, and edging every leaf with cold. Inside, your breath grows slower. The tools remain where they were placed. You cannot see them clearly, but you can sense their order along the wall. Saw, plane, chisel, auger, rule, square, draw knife, mallet. They seem less like objects now and more like sleeping thoughts. Each one carries tomorrow's labour, but none can demand it yet. Night has placed a hand over their mouths. Even tools must wait for dawn. Historians still debate how best to interpret the emotional interior of cabins like this, especially when written records come so often from enslavers, travellers, and officials. Archaeology reveals fragments, and oral histories preserve memory, but private feelings are harder to recover. Did a room feel safe, watched, crowded, warm, lonely, sacred, temporary, or home? The answer depends on whose breath filled it. You turn slightly beneath the blanket. The ropes creak again, then go quiet. The pillow, if it deserves that generous title, supports your head unevenly. You adjust it with one hand until the pressure softens. The room smells cooler now. Smoke has thinned, leaving ash, clay, wool, and night air. Under those scents remains the faint sweetness of cut wood, as if the workbench is still dreaming of pine. A cabin at night teaches the body to understand layers. Warmth near the hearth, cool air by the wall, dry wool against skin, rough cloth beneath the cheek, hard boards below the mattress, cold darkness beyond the door. You do not think these things in words for long. You feel them, and feeling becomes enough. Sleep begins when thought stops trying to name everything. Somewhere outside, an animal shifts in straw. The sound is soft and brief. A hoof nudges wood. A chain gives a low touch of metal. Then stillness returns. You listen, but with less urgency now. The cabin has sorted the night into harmless sounds and distant uncertainties. Not everything is safe. Not everything must be answered. Your body chooses the sounds closest to warmth. The red aglow beneath the ash pulses faintly. It lights the underside of the pothook and a small crescent of hearthstone. Shadows rise up the chimney, too dark to separate from soot. The cabin feels smaller as the light lowers, but also more protected. Darkness outside is wide. Darkness inside is gathered. It folds around familiar things and lets them rest. You think of the carpenter lying here after a day of shaping wood. His palms may ache. His shoulders may hold the memory of soaring. His back may complain with the sincerity of a church bell. Still, he has returned to a room partly made by knowledge like his own. The bed, latch, shelf, stool, and wall all speak a language his hands understand. That recognition may offer a quiet dignity. The world beyond the cabin remains troubled and unequal. Fields sleep under cold stars. Fences stretch across dark land. The main house stands somewhere apart, with its own fire and different fears. Other cabins hold other breaths, other stories, other aches. The plantation is not one experience, though power tries to make it so. Night reveals many separate lives, each enclosed by thin walls and weather. Your eyes close, then open once more. The room has shifted while you blinked. Objects have become gentler. The bench is only a dark line. The coat near the door is only a hanging shadow. The bowl is a pale curve. The floorboards are hidden except where ash glow touches them. Sleep does this too. It turns the world from detail into outline, then from outline into feeling. A final thought comes to the threshold. It is the line between cold and shelter, labour and rest, control and private breath. The door is not grand, but it holds. Its latch is simple, but it catches. The chinking is cracked in places, but it helps. The roof creaks, but remains above you. Imperfect things can still protect. Perhaps that is one of the cabin's quieter teachings. You draw the blanket higher, its wool brushes your mouth, and you lower it slightly. Better. The air that reaches your face is cool enough to keep you aware of winter. The air beneath the blanket is warmer, shaped by your own breathing. The bedstead gives another small creak, then accepts your weight completely. The cabin's last noises begin to spread farther apart. A coal settles, a board ticks, the wind softens, your breath deepens. The fire is no longer something you watch, it is something you trust. The door is no longer something you study, it is something that stands between you and the frost. The tools no longer ask questions, the floor no longer reports every movement. The cabin, with all its cracks and repairs, has become a vessel for sleep. The final wind down begins as the room loosens its hold on waking thought, and every rough edge seems to blur into a softer shape. You're lying still now, wrapped in the smell of smoke and wool, while the cold night outside drifts across the yard without needing your attention. The pines move slowly in the dark, their needles whispering to one another in a language older than the plantation, older than the cabin, older than the path beneath the frost. The embers rest under ash, keeping their secret warmth. Nothing bright remains except a dull red shimmer, low and patient, like a thought too gentle to finish. Your shoulders sink, your hands uncurl. The mattress rustles once, then quiets beneath you. Every breath enters cool and leaves warm. Every breath is slower than the last. The carpenter's tools sleep along the wall, freed for a few hours from sawdust, pressure, repair, and command. The bench is silent, the latch is still, the cup waits empty, the blanket holds its humble warmth with surprising devotion. Outside, the fields, fences, animals, paths, and watchful trees fade into one deep layer of night. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to measure another board, listen for another hinge, or name another sound beyond the door. The cabin holds enough for this moment, enough fire beneath ash, enough roof against frost, enough darkness to soften the room, enough quiet to let the mind loosen its careful grip. So you rest beside the fading hearth, breathing with the slow rhythm of the hidden coals. The cold remains outside, and the warmth remains near. The night grows wide, but your world grows small, simple, and still. Sleep gathers like smoke under the rafters, gentle and grey, settling over every tool, every board, every tired thought, until only peace remains. End of script. Sleep well.